INEC meets with election observers to review true and effective governorship elections.
Senate urges National University Commission to wade into ASU and federal government stalemate.
More than 4,000 pupils, including orphans, enroll in Northern Borno schools.
Good morning, Nigeria. Today we shall discuss governance and funding models for public universities.
Now, across the globe, universities are designed for research, teaching, instruction, and knowledge transfer. Now, universities in Nigeria also play this role, and which is critical for national development.
Now, it therefore implies that they must adhere to the best practice in the area of good governance so as to ensure quality decision making.
Now, these qualities are intended to ensure participation of both the teaching community and students in a manner that is consensus-oriented, responsive, effective, efficient, and of course inclusive for accountability.
Today, the structure of funding for Nigerian universities is partly monthly government subvention, donations, endowment funds, and levies. Maybe we should also add, tuition fees, should also be added.
Well, that's right. That's for state public universities. The tuition fees in federal universities are virtually minimal, if not non-existent. There are a few charges here and there. There are other sources of funding, such as commercializing innovation, and of course, this is pretty low in our public universities. We also have research funding, as well as sources coming in from intervention agencies, for instance, the Tertiary Education Trust Fund. And there are a number of other avenues that remain unexplored, as observers have pointed out, even though host communities sometimes also do contribute to the revenue of Nigerian universities.
But in other climes, such as the US, public research universities receive funds from the federal, state, and local governments in the form of grants and contracts. The largest examples of these are grants for financial and research.
The financial aid and research area. Now, in the meantime, in the United Kingdom, there are, of course, two principal elements of public spending on higher education. They include direct funding through funding councils for teaching and research, as well as students' loans for maintenance and fees.
And several reasons, several persons indeed are insisting that Nigerian universities ought to look beyond current sources of funding to grants, for instance, charging more fees for international enrollment, being open to partnership opportunities, and taking advantage of local industries. Because of course yesterday we're talking about how we're going to effect from laboratory to the manufacturing sector.
That's right.
The floor of the manufacturing sector.
That's right. That's the linkage between the ivory tower and industry, or the town and the ground. That linkage, of course, remains pretty weak in our system. Now, there have been other suggestions with regard to funding. These are the issues, of course, we shall be taking a look at in our conversation segment on Good Morning Nigeria today. But more principally, Kirian, there was an issue that popped up yesterday in the course of our conversation. This has been a matter of principal concern regarding just how well university funds are being managed at the moment, whether it's a pittance or whether it's a humongous amount. What is the level of accountability that we find in our public universities?
Exactly. The managerial, capacity or capability of the managers of the universities, and of course, like you said, accountability, which is most important.
That's right. So we shall be taking a look at that issue against the backdrop of the lingering ASU crisis. Today being the 1st of September, so the strike now by ASU is well over 6 months and 2 weeks. Yeah, we're now closing in on the 7th month of the strike. It's Good Morning Nigeria, live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. I'm Kingsley Osadolo, and I welcome you to the program.
And I'm Kirian Umai, also asking you to please stay with us as we bring you another package of course, news and the current affairs on Good Morning Nigeria. Of course, you should expect to have all the complimentary segments. They're all on schedule. For now, let's bring in Tessie Emery, who has the morning news highlights. Hello, Tessie. Good to see you.
Here, Kieran. Hello, Kingsley. And good morning, Nigerians. Here is the morning news. The Department of State Services, DSS, has denied media reports stating that the service adopts innocent Nigerians under Buhari presidency. A statement by the DSS Public Relations, Dr. Peter Afnaya, indicates that the service only arrests when necessary, evidently carried out in line with the tenets of democratic ideals. The statement adds that at no time has the service embarked on its actions without following procedures in respect of obtaining warrants of arrest or orders for detention from competent legal authorities. Similarly, the service enjoins the press to fast check, otherwise those who run foul of the law must be ready to face justice. And coming down to 2023 polls comes with the counting of the costs and gains of previous elections. So, INEC is meeting with observers of the Osun and Ekiti governorship elections for credible outing in 2023 polls.
I urge those who have not yet submitted their reports to us to give it a priority and give us the reports from the 2 elections, because we need to look at all the processes before the general elections. And when we are looking for reports, we are looking for not just areas where there are challenges, we are also looking at areas where the commission is doing well.
As observers, you represent the generality of the Nigerian citizens. So the commission is glad to engage with you.
Minister of Special Duties and Intergovernmental Affairs, Senator George Akume, is of the view that autonomy for local government in Nigeria will largely address the challenges of insecurity and unemployment in the country. He made this position known at a national conference on local government administration in Abuja.
It is high time we work together to substitute restraint and the weakening powers associated with the local government system in our country.
Every security challenges are local. The solution to it is a local solution.
The National Council on Local Government in Nigeria, the council, once it is established, would act as the highest advisory body to the nation on issues of local government. It would comprise of political leaders, key functionaries of the local government system, as well as major stakeholders that would meet regularly to discuss and share ideas on how to develop benchmarks of good governance.
Down to education, the Senate has urged the National Universities Commission to get involved in resolving the conflict between ASU and the federal government so that students can return to their classes. This was when the Senate Committee on Tertiary Institutions and TED Fund visited the Commission on an oversight in Abuja. Borno State Governor Professor Babagana Umar Zulum was in Munguno in northern Borno to take part in the enrollment of 4,229 school-aged children, many of them orphans whose parents were killed during the Boko Haram insurgency in parts of the northern Borno. With schools infrastructure in place, the enrollment exercise is targeting 10,000 pupils under the first phase.
We are here to see how we can tackle one of the root causes of the insurgency, which is illiteracy. And that has informed the decision of Borno State Government to enroll as many as possible, especially the dropouts.
The Acting Director General of the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA, Alhaji Salihu Abdulhamid Dembul, has charged the management and staff of NTA Lagos Channel 10 and the educational television ETV to continue to promote peace and unity in their reportage so as to further strengthen the diverse nature of the country. He stated this during an on-the-spot assessment of the station's facilities in Lagos.
The essence of our coming to see the facilities on ground and equally to meet with the staff is for us to interface, understand exactly what problems that they are facing, and also come out with a resolution on the way forward.
NTA will produce 24 hours content. So I want to implore you to be proud. Watch what you do, watch what others do, and improve on it. You'll be amazed with the type of content you'll be able to come up with, and ultimately it's going to be for the good of NTA.
And that's the news for now. Good morning, Nigeria continues with Kingsley and Kieran after this break.
You're watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. It's time for business news, and we'll join our correspondent, Aleka Opanache Arwa.
Amid the shortfall of wheat in the country and the need to bridge the demand-supply gap, the federal government and the African Development Bank have developed a new national strategy to ensure Nigeria achieves 50% self-sufficiency in wheat production by 2027. The 10-year national strategy for self-sufficiency in wheat production is to be implemented between 2022 and 2032 targets in order to increase wheat production from the current 71 metric tons to 3.5 million metric tons in 5 years. The Chief Agro-Industry Officer, AFDB, Tabi Kakari, while speaking at a validation workshop on national strategy on wheat self-sufficiency in Abuja, noted that the new strategy aims to synergize and harmonize efforts of all stakeholders, increase investments into the wheat value chain by crowding in private sector investments, and ultimately achieving national wheat self-sufficiency. The strategy, he maintained, is to increase production areas from the current 1,000 hectares to about 2 million hectares with a productivity of 3.0 tons per hectare or more. The Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development, Dr. Mohammed Abubakar, says if Nigeria can achieve self-sufficiency in rice production, increasing wheat production is also achievable. Let's take a look at Wednesday tradings on the floor of the exchange. With business news, Alika Okpanachi Arua.
Thank you, Aleka. And next on the program is newspaper review.
All right, we have three newspapers with us this morning. We have the Sun, the Nation, as well as Al Jazeera. So, Kieran, let's begin by taking a look at the window page of the Sun newspaper.
All right, now to the Sun newspaper. Article Tambuwa PDP challenge Wike's case. That's on page 14. There's a writer to that. You say the hearing fixed for September 14. And of course, APC will get 25% in most states. That's according to PDP. And at the lead story on the Sun newspaper, Ayu Wike trade words with the two writers. Those calling for my resignation are kids, says the PDP chair. Nobody can threaten us. Rivers State Governor Yeson Wike is indeed heating up. All right, there are other stories. Resolve ASU strike now will be tells federal government. All that story on page 6 of the Sun newspaper. But energy transition plan, VP departs for U.S. to meet Kamala, that's the U.S. Vice President. The story is on page 4. Now, Shekararu supporters remain in NNPP, refuse to defect. All right, Nigeria's oil revenue down 28% to 799 billion in Q1 of 2022. That's so according to CBN. All right. Have other stories here. Buhari to Otom, I never ordered security agents not to touch Fulani killer herdsmen. Now the bottom of the Sun, governors AGF, Kalu, Hill, Bishop Kuka at 70. All right, that'll be it for the Sun.
All right, Kieran, let's also take a look at the front page of the Nation newspaper. Above the nameplate, you have the following headlines. EFCC probing Zamfara governor for alleged money laundering. You have details of that story on page 4. 7 family members die after breakfast in Sokoto. Buhari, governors, Kalu and others greet Kuka at 70. Ganduje and Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation sign MOU. Now, below the nameplate, Microfinance Bank gets CBN's nod to recover 5.8 billion naira from defaulters. Investors maintain 4.5 trillion naira gains for 8 months. The rider says 28.3 billion naira recorded as net loss in August. And the photograph there shows some of the dignitaries who were present at the commemoration of the 70th birthday of Bishop Matthew Hassan Kuka. The event took place in Abuja. Now, PDP crisis, even though the headline, the caption here is saying that the commemoration of the birthday was in Sokoto. It was actually at the Sheraton Hotel in Abuja. Now, the lead story comes with a double-decker headline. PDP crisis. Ayu hits Wike, Otom, Makinde, and Pazu. They were nowhere when we formed PDP. Rivers governor demands state's stake in party. Mimiko, Duke, Adoke, Ghana accused of fueling crisis. NWC to meet Benue, and you have the other stories there. Aviation fuel price hike may affect our operations. CAS, that's Chief of Air Staff Amaro warns aviation fuel price hike may affect our operations. 6 import license and depot establishment. 2035 fossil fuel deadline will hurt economy, says MAN. And lastly, on the front page, there's the strip of the page. Akeredolu accuses federal government of bias in Tompolo pipeline contract. You have details on page 4.
Right. Okay. Now, finally, we have Al Jazeera here. Al Jazeera newspaper. CBN lauds Access Bank commitment to sustainable principles. That's on page 23. The lead story on Al Jazeera, backlash over ASU indefinite strike. 3 riders to that. Lecturers' engagement with private universities fueling action, according to NANS. Labor is about productivity. says Issa Aremu. NEC scheduled meeting to resolve impasse. Okay, the other headlines here. Gorbachev was courageous reformer, according to Buhari. It's on page 2. Youth becoming increasingly disillusioned about politics, says Jonathan. It's on page 2 as well. Now, 2023 presidency, I will tackle brain drain, says Obi. That's on page 11. Flood, 15 bodies recovered in Maiduguri River. It's on page 2. MTF hearing, reps threaten to sanction absentee agencies. It's on page 30. Well, we've told you this before in other papers. Northern governors celebrate Bishop Kuka at 70. It's on page 9 on Al Jazeera. Kebbi, Zamfara, Bauchi top out of school children table. Details on page 14 of Al Jazeera. Oh, I can say we have a number of headlines here that we can entertain this morning. Zamfara, out of school children, right? Kebbi, Zamfara, about to top out of school children table. What does that portend, for states such as Kebbi, Zamfara, Bauchi? It's expected that with all the policies of state governments in those states, would have been they would have ramped up recruitment of pupils, especially at the kindergarten level, primary, and of course junior secondary school. At least the basic education that are required for the children to have.
Well, the simple way to look at it is to say apparently nothing much has changed.
Exactly.
The same dismal enrollment numbers that those states have grappled with continue to grow. In any event, you are having a growth in the population. So younger persons are coming of age to get enrolled into schools. And if they are not getting enrolled, they begin to swell the numbers that we have referred to. And the question that one would ask is, just how efficacious are the policies and programs intended to pull the children off the streets and get them enrolled in schools? For instance, the school feeding program was intended to be an attraction for pupils to come to school. And if you recall on Good Morning Nigeria, we have discussed this in the past, there was actually a boom in school enrollment. Why is it that in some states, therefore, we continue to have these very low numbers? And in particular, what is it that stakeholders in those states are doing? And let's face it, I mean, Kira, let's face it. The more out-of-school children that you have, the more developmental challenges there would be. Because elsewhere, where the numbers of children enrolled in school, where those numbers are growing, they can't wait for you to get an opportunity to play catch-up.
Exactly, and there are ready targets, for recruitment by insurgents, Boko Haram and the other terrorist groups. There are targets, and I was surprised sometime last week when I had to, meet my Nigerians in Abuja, somewhere in Gwarimpa area. They're all in uniform, carrying their balls and stop begging on the street of Abuja. I was so shocked, because Abuja, for me, it's not a place where you see such, development. Where if it's in other states that we talked about earlier on, you could believe that. But something has to be done. You recall that during the Johnson administration, we had to venture into Almajiri schools in the northern part of the country, but that was not sustained. And some governors are saying that it never worked, and probably because they don't want it to work. Because if the schools have been established, it's not just to recruit the pupils there, and of course arrange the development.
I saw those schools that were constructed by the Jonathan administration for Almajiris. Some of them had boarding facilities. Mm-hmm. They had boarding facilities because the argument was that some of them came from out of state, and therefore you needed to quarter them. They also even had staff quarters in some of the states of the federation. And by the way, the Almajiri schools that were constructed were not just only in the north. Some were also built in the southern part of the country. And Wike then as Honorable Minister of State for Education, was responsible for that. But you see, there's so much, sometimes we infuse a great deal of partisan politics into issues. Oh, this is not going to work, it wasn't properly conceived. If, assuming Goodluck didn't conceive it properly, what then have successive state governments done
to perfect it?
Precisely, or to enunciate their own plans and programs to say, this is what we are doing to pull these children out of school. And we'll keep hearing cultural arguments, and some persons on Good Morning Nigeria have told us that those cultural arguments are not sustainable. This is part of the bedrock for the foundation of sustainable development in our country.
Exactly. And this what happened yesterday or 2 days ago, 15 bodies recovered in Maiduguri River. Was it as a result of flooding, or was there any other mishap, that led to up to 15 bodies being recovered from a river? Were they drowned? Were they in a ferry or any kind of a canoe or something?
I think the first thing to clear is the perception amongst some about flooding in the northern part of the country. You will be wondering, but that's supposed to be arid region. So where will the floods come from, and so on and so forth. But the truth is that the tributaries that supply or feed, as experts will say, feed the major rivers in the country, that's River Niger and River Benue, have a lot of waters that they also that they receive and pour into the main rivers, and therefore when flash floods do occur, that's to say the earth is not able to absorb a great deal of the water that is there, then you have flash floods and persons just get swept away.
And that happens usually when it's raining, flash floods.
When it is raining, or when, of course, you are having inflows, say in the case of River Niger, when you're having inflows
from other countries,
from upstream, and then that happens. But it also speaks, because if you recall, was it last year or the year before, there was some catastrophic incident that happened in Niger. It was a boat that capsized, and scores of persons lost their lives. But again, that relates more to management, efficient management of our waterways and the advisories that these persons normally will receive. One point, remember there were two issues we couldn't touch on when we were discussing the stories yesterday. One, of course, has to do with the indebtedness by airline operators to NCAA. NCAA stands for the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority, and the amount is said to run into billions of naira. And here at the front page of the Nation newspaper today, at the foot of the front page, we are hearing aviation fuel price hike may affect our operations. Chief of air staff, about, of course, is raising that alarm. So again, that's part of the issues in our aviation sector. We've had a conversation around this.
Yes,
Karen, just a minute, please. The point that is important to make, and I think that we'll continue to review and revise this. Airline operators have often complained about the quantum of charges and fees that they have to pay. And you have to ask yourself the question, why is it that we have seen a situation in our country where regulatory agencies have also become revenue generating agencies, and sometimes their primary focus will shift from core regulation to revenue generation?
I think that each and every regulatory body that we have has a specific responsibility. And then if the airline operators are charged outrageously, from the beginning, they should have complained about that, even before they start operation in the place. But now they are complaining. And what am I going to ask is, why is NCAA allowing them to owe up to, humongous amount of money before you begin to request for payment? You are threatening to withdraw their licenses when you have allowed them to owe you for such a long time that the thing has become so huge that payment becomes very difficult. Now that we have aviation so difficult in the country, how would they cope with the business? They are also employers of labor, and many Nigerians are working in those and operating in those airlines. So it's going to be something that should be resolved between the government and of course the operators of airlines in Nigeria. All right, that is
basically, those are the stories that But I think that is instructive. Let me just throw this in, Kieran. When you see the front page when you see the photograph, let's see that front page photograph of the Nation newspaper. The Nation newspaper. You want to see the front page of the Nation newspaper. The key photograph there. If you can see that very quickly, on the front page of the Nation newspaper, the photograph shows Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu to the left, Bishop Kuka next to him, former President Goodluck Jonathan, and Babajide Sanwo-Olu, Governor of Lagos. A few days ago, there was also a report that Bola Ahmed Tinubu and some APC governors visited former President Goodluck Jonathan at his Abuja residence. And I'm sure you must have read some of the messages flying around in the social media. That's, of course, with the cause of partisan adversarial political campaigns. People will say all kinds of things. And sometimes, if you are not one of them, you pick up a fight that is not yours. So when politicians reconcile, those of you who are outsiders and their supporters who would have broken your heads or broken your legs, you would not be there when they reconcile.
And just like the saying goes, that in politics, no permanent friend and no permanent enemy. It is here we conclude the newspaper review for today. We thank you for joining us. Do stay tuned as we continue to bring you more from Good Morning Nigeria today. We'll take a short break now. Now, to begin our discussion, let's take this background report as put together by Abdulsalam Jibril.
There is a popular African proverb that states that when elephants fight, it is the grass that suffers. Some analysts note that this scenario is what is currently playing out between the Academic Staff Union of Universities, ASU, and the federal government, with students being the proverbial grass. Some experts have stressed that there is an urgent need to rethink how Nigeria funds and runs public universities. In the 2022 budget, the federal government allocated the sum of 355.47 billion naira to the 44 federal universities from the total budget of 875.93 billion naira given to the education sector. According to Budget, a civic organization data-driven approach that tracks the impact of its work in Nigeria, out of the 355.47 billion naira allocated to the federal universities, 326.9 billion naira would go for recurrent expenditure, comprising 320.7 billion naira for personnel cost and 6.1 billion naira for overhead cost. 25.5 billion naira is slated for capital projects in the universities. In the United Kingdom, the government provides about 66% of the research funding for its universities, while in South Africa, the government provides about 50%. In the United States, sources of funding are tuition, endowments, and research grants, among others. This is because public universities depend on government funds, as they typically lack the endowments and donation network of private universities. Some analysts call for a funding model that is built around realistically calculated cost of training each student yearly in public universities, not around just how much is needed for salaries. How can Nigerian universities adopt a more diverse, more robust, and more predictable pool of funding? Can government expand the governance structure and funding base of universities in line with international best practices? These and more guests will be speaking to on the program shortly.
All right, thank you very much, Abdulsalam, for that backgrounder. And we have guests who are with us for today's conversation. First, let's welcome Professor Salihu Mustafa. He's a former Vice Chancellor of the Modibo Adama University in Yola. That was formerly the Federal University of Technology in Yola. He's also a former Director of Research at the National Universities Commission. Professor Mustafa, we're glad to have you this morning.
Thank you.
Okay. And also joining us for today's conversation, this time via Zoom, is Professor Mohammed Aliu Paiko. Professor Paiko is the Deputy Vice Chancellor at Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida University in Lapai, Niger State. He's joining us via Zoom from Niger State. Professor Paiko, we're glad to have you this morning.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, indeed. Via Zoom as well from Owerri, this time around, the capital of Imo State, is the Professor Mohammed Menoma, former Vice Chancellor, Nasarawa State University, Kefi. Prof, good morning and welcome to the program.
Good morning. You are welcome. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Incidentally, Professor Menoma is an accountant. So the numbers will be at his fingertips, and he also ran a state university. But now let's begin the conversation here in the studios with Professor Salihu Mustafa, who is former Vice Chancellor of Modibo Adama University in Yola. But there are some persons who would argue that part of what we are experiencing today in terms of the prolonged strike by the Academic Staff Union of Nigerian universities derives from issues around governance, sustainable funding of Nigerian universities. More particularly with regard to the funding of public universities, there are issues that are pertinent. In the first instance, that it is no longer viable to appear to rely on financing from the federal government in the case of federal universities. What are your thoughts?
Well, thank you for asking that question. I think we need to look at the historical facts pertaining to funding of universities generally on a wider scale. There are two types of funding. One is the free tuition, and the other one is shared funding. And I want to look at the successful countries where free funding, free education is practiced, like in Germany. In Germany, university education from undergraduate to postgraduate up to PhD level is free. And the funding is carried out by the 16 federating states in Germany. But now look at the economy of Germany. The GDP of Germany is $3.8 trillion. And the GDP is $51,000 per capita. If you look at Nigeria, with a population of 210, the population of Germany is about 80 million, while the population of Nigeria is 210 million. Our GDP is $407 billion, which is 1/10 of that of Germany. And the GDP per capita of Nigeria is only about $5,000, which is also about 1/10 of that of Germany. So if you look at the funding model of Germany, it can actually afford to even pay for people to go into the university. It is getting 10 times as much as what Nigeria actually earns. So that is why universities in Germany are very successful, and they are among the top ranked universities in the world. Now, if we look at the shared funding, the typical example is the United States. In the United States, the federal government contribution is only 10%, while the states contribute about 36%. And tuition forms about 11%, while the most important revenue source are the states in the United States. And also from sales, normally dormitory charges and services in the universities. So these are the two cases of successful models. Now in the case of Nigeria, we seem to be practicing the British system. But the British universities actually started charging fees in 1998.
And today they are charging close to about £10,000 per year. So the issue now is, what do we do in this country? Do we stick to the present setup, or we adopt any of these models? And if you want me to expatiate on this, then we can go later on.
Okay, thank you. We'll certainly do in the course of the conversation. Well, one good thing about program this morning is that we have vice chancellors and former vice chancellors who have experienced school management. And let's go to Professor Mohammed Menoma at this point. There are also issues surrounding management of available funds in the university by university authorities. Part of our discussion yesterday, we talked about how vice chancellors these days have a litany of security agents around them in functions, and even while in their offices. And one would ask, why should that be? Some have also accused vice chancellors of mismanagement of available funds. That is one. Two, is the system of education in Nigeria workable, considering the fact that we have had it so bad in the past and even at present with respect to university management? From what Professor Mustafa told us now, it appears that the problem could be a systematic, it could be a system problem. What is your take on that?
Thank you very much. All the issues are actually genuine. You find out that there are problems of the system, there are problems of management, there are also problems of sources. The situations are such that we need actually to look at options and adopt the ones that are workable in the environment we operate. There are other variables that need to be put into the equation. For instance, the environment, the infrastructure, the capacity of parents to mobilize the resources, and also the capacity of government to generate the desired income to be able to fund universities. But if you keep ourselves strictly to the issues at hand, you'll find out that if you're talking about the management of the resources of the university, it is because government is not doing what it ought to do in terms of the governance structure. The university is supposed to be managed by committees so that any individual on his own can do certain things and go away with it. So vice chancellors are supposed to operate with committee systems, and each decision is supposed to be a product of a process, a chain of events that comes from different committees. So if we continue to do what we ought to do in a university system, you will find out that the issue of mismanagement will not be there, because there are enough checks and balances within the system that can make governance in the university to be very effective. But the idea, for instance, one of the issues that we're talking about in this strike issue is that every 5 years there is supposed to be a visitation panel. They are supposed to actually conduct exercise to determine what has been done within a period of preceding 5 years, and come up with what ought to be done going ahead. But government has refused to set up these committees. After pressures, they set up the committees work, submit a report. 2 years down the line, nothing is done about those things. So those are the kind of things that actually allow vice chancellors to be able to do things in the manner that is not in the interest of the university system.
All right, Professor Menoma, thank you very much there for your opening salvo. As we said, it's two issues, of course, that we are discussing today, and they are interrelated, namely the governance of universities as well as the funding. You touched on aspects of it. We'll return to you in the course of the conversation. Let's now join Professor Paiko, where Professor Paiko is the Deputy Vice Chancellor of Ibrahim Badamasi, Babangida University in La Pai. Professor Mohammed Paiko, you're there. We can see you on the right side of our screen. Of course, there's some sensationalism around the reports with regard to what you did recently following the prolonged strike by ASU and the comments credited to the ASU president, in which he was said to have spoken disparagingly about state-owned universities. But you just tell us, what does the ongoing strike represent? Is it a crisis of governance of our institutions or a crisis of funding? And therefore, what are the pathways out of this?
Thank you very much. Actually, the ongoing industrial action by the academic staff union of universities is actually a combination of so many factors. It is a clear indication of the failure of the present model of funding of the universities in Nigeria. It is also a culmination of the failure of governments to take charge of what it is supposed to take. It is also the culmination of the failures of the academic staff union of universities itself. You know, if you look at ASU, some different writers have said it from different forums that ASU is even the problem itself. ASU has grown to such a level that it has become a monster that is almost about to consume itself. So if you look at the current situation, you know, I'm not taking sides. Government has its own fair share of the blame. ASU has its own very, very fair share of the blame. So it depends where you are looking at the problem from. For us in the state government-owned universities, there are issues which ASU has currently constructed does not take us, you know, fully into what it ought to do. You know, for instance, the current strike that is ongoing is about IPPIS. That is a payment platform. The payment platform belongs to federal government. What does that affect me in the state government? I do not have IPPIS, and so a payment platform that should cater for federal universities ordinarily does not affect me. Secondly, it is about earned academic allowance, a very germane issue. The issue right from the beginning had not been properly articulated, in my opinion, because the whole issue is surrounding how much a lecturer should be remunerated. That is actually the crux of the matter. You take a model from medical and dental workers in Nigeria. Every time they go on industrial action, it is about their pay package. I mean, the universities belong to government. They belong to state government. They belong to individuals, as the case may be. If the government is unable to fulfill its own part to provide what it's supposed to provide for you to be able to adequately work with, it's either the decision for you to advise government on what it needs to do as far as university revitalization is concerned. If it does not, then you focus on the fundamentals that is very essential for you to function. How much should you be remunerated? You cannot hold on to the issue of university revitalization and try to hold the system down. When medical and dental workers go on strike, they do not talk about revitalization of the hospitals. They do not talk about you have to provide social resources. No, they talk about what they need to be remunerated. You go to hospitals, government, whatever is available provided. Those who are ready to work, they use what is available to work. What is not available, well, and that is a sector that caters for life. Now, for education, ASU has a very strong point. The universities are not supposed to be the way they are, but at the end of the day, this is what the government wants it to be. If it is an advisory, you go ahead and advise, and then if they don't hear, then you talk about how you should be remunerated. But ASU is part of the problem itself. When they complain about universities being created here and there, who gives advice for universities to be created? or for new programs to be launched. ASU, the National Universities Commission, every time a new university will come up, all the programs need to be resource verified. ASU constitutes 75% of the panel that goes for those verifications. So when it pleases them, ASU will say accreditation status, very good. When it also comes to the issue of they want to now begin to accuse government, they now say the universities are not properly funded. So you see, the government has a part in the crisis. ASU itself has a part in the crisis. Parents and students have also not been they have not been mobilized enough to consider that they also need, to support education. So many people have spoken about the models in Germany, in the UK, and elsewhere. What is the contribution of students? I give you an example in Abuja University. In 2018, the total amount of resources that funded that university, 2018-2019, was roughly about 9 billion. Out of 9 billion, the school fees component was only a paltry 7%. School fees, 7%. The state government catered for over 50% in salaries and allowances, but school fees, ordinarily 7%. I mean, how long are we going to continue like this? For government to think that it can take on primary education, secondary education, tertiary education in the form of colleges of education, polytechnics, universities. It is too much for the government to chew. At some point, we have to adopt a model that is really very holistic, is very realistic, and is also sustainable. I think my colleagues have spoken so much about this, but the approach that ASU is taking on this matter has become so controversial. You cannot be fighting wars with two warring factions and assume that until one faction is totally dead before you strike a truce. No, even during a war, people talk. You don't shut down the whole university system and say that until some certain conditions are met, you cannot move forward. ASU or university lecturers are not the only ones in Nigeria. You cannot shut down the economy forever. And by the way, everybody that is in the struggle is very, very important. ASU cannot, through their president, call some of us quacks, call some of us irrelevant. Recently, even after that, he also said students and parents are very irrelevant to the struggle, that they do not support ASU, and therefore why should they look for the support of parents? So this is the manner, the kind of leadership of ASU that is totally not representing the real struggle that ASU is supposed to be fighting. He is too emotional, he takes things too personal, and he believes that ASU, or he has made the country to believe as if you are not a lecturer or if you are not a university, you don't work in the university, then you are not important in Nigeria. That is not the way to go. We are supposed to negotiate, to put forward our claims.
Professor Paiko, we thank you very much indeed. Your postulations, have been really considered very adequate from the perspective that you're coming, and we appreciate that. We may have course to return to you, and of course for you to expatiate on some of the issues that you have raised. But of course, the ASU president is not here, so we would like to avoid making reference to what he said, because if he was here, of course, we'll be able to respond to what you are saying. All right, now let's return to the studio once more, and here now we have another guest who just joined us, Professor Yakubu Aboki Ochefu. Professor Ochefu is the Secretary General Committee of Vice Chancellors of Nigerian Universities and the Secretary General Committee of Pro Chancellors of Nigerian Federal Universities. It's a pleasure to have you this morning.
Yes, man.
Yeah, you are really the man we're looking for, because you are still very active, and of course, being a Secretary General of Committee of Vice Chancellors, of course, you have a better understanding of what the university governance is all about. And what we've been discussing this morning or have been tailored, towards having a better understanding of what it should be to have good governance in our universities, as well as sources of funding. Of course, education is in the concurrent list, and of course, which gives the states the power to establish their own schools. But when we talk about ASU, it does appear that all lecturers, both federal and state universities, are members of ASU. And from all indications, some other bodies, education bodies, who are also involved in teaching and learning in the universities, are also taking different stand as to the current situation in Nigeria. So, give us your own view of what the situation is, and of course, the way forward.
Yeah, thank you very much, viewers. One thing we need to establish very quickly is that the tertiary education space in general and the university education space in particular is an ecosystem of a number of stakeholders, ranging from the proprietors to the parents. And in between, you have the various staff, academic and non-teaching. You have the community in which the university is located. You have, within the spectrum of the proprietors, you have those who also regulate the system. So it's a huge ecosystem which most often times get lost in the analysis of what goes into a tertiary education system and into a university system. And that comes to rather to the question you asked in terms of governance. And I've said on a number of occasions that the governance model that Nigerian universities are currently adopting is seriously in need of review, because if you look at the parts of the world that we inherited this model from, they have moved on. They're no longer using this model. So the time has come for all the stakeholders in this ecosystem to align, to come to a stakeholder meeting and say, let us review these governance models. Is it working for us? For example, in the UK universities where we got this model from, the congregation now acts like a parliament, where and the executive team, has been merged to what you now have as council and management in the Nigerian university system. That has been merged in the UK system, in many of the UK universities. You don't have a distinction between council and management, as it were. So you have a governing council that has a chief executive, a chief academic officer at the top. So the pro-chancellor is like the vice chancellor of some sort, it's like the chief executive officer, and then he has line managers down, and then you have the congregation as parliament. So that may not work for us in its entirety, but we really need to sit down and say, let us look at our governance models and see whether it's working for us in this age where knowledge has become so critical to national development that we cannot afford to treat it with kid gloves, as it were.
Professor Chifu, thank you very much. Please explain to our viewers the existing governance model of our universities, mostly public universities.
Yeah, the public universities have a proprietor, and for federal universities is the federal government. For state universities is the state government. Now, the proprietor is represented by the president of the Federal Republic in the federal universities as the visitor to the university. So you have the visitor who is largely ceremonial, but within that ceremonial role that he plays, there is also an important component which has to do with like an internal audit, an institutional audit, in terms of a visitation panel that he approves every so often, in some cases 5 years, in some cases 7 years. So, and it is from that institutional office that is conducted by the visitation panel that now gives him an insight to whether this university that I own is doing well, how well is this university doing. Then you come back to the managers of the system itself, that is vested in the pro-chancellors. And the pro-chancellors consist of two sets of actors. External representation that are nominated by the federal government through the Federal Ministry of Education and the National Universities Education.
A commission?
Yes, National Universities Commission and Ministry of Education. You have the chairman of the governing council, that is usually a seasoned administrator or academic, that comes in as pro-chancellor and chairman of council. So he will be like the board of directors in your public limited company. Yes. Then you have the management committee that consists of the vice chancellor, his deputies, and his principal officers. And then you have Senate that manages academic matters, and then you have a congregation that is a body of degree holders in the university, who from time to time, in our Nigerian system, they don't have any special role, as it were, in terms of driving policy, but the vice chancellor relies on them to also provide a sort of audit of his administration as well, to look at what he's doing that is they don't like and things like that, and then they make inputs. So the governance chain is the council, the management, and the Senate. These are the key actors that drive the life of the Nigerian university.
What I've said now, is it hierarchical? What of those?
It is hierarchical because the vice chancellor and management, even though the vice chancellor is a member of council, just like I said, your board of directors.
So we have a chairman. Yes, the vice chancellor. Sorry, Prof. Yeah. Just for the benefit of our viewers.
Yes.
The governing council is headed by a chairman who is also a pro-chancellor. Yes. Now, that is the equivalent, for instance, of a board of directors, where you have a chairman of the board of directors, and then on that board, you also have the managing director.
Yes.
The managing director must come from the board.
Who is alter ego here? Who takes the final decision, in terms of decision making?
It depends on the type of decision we are talking about. For example, day-to-day administration, running of the system, the vice chancellor wears 4 hats. He is the chief academic officer and chairman of Senate. He's the chief accounting officer. He's the chief executive officer in terms of the overall ecosystem that we're talking about, and he's also the chief security officer. There are certain decisions he must report to the pro-chancellor and chairman of council. There are certain decisions he cannot take. The budget of the university, major policy decisions, property of the university, all those are vested in the governing council. And so the governing council, for example, if you enter into an agreement to take a loan to support some of your services, if you don't get approval from your body, from the governing council, that will not fly.
Okay, Professor Chefu, thank you very much. Let's return to Professor Salihu Mustafa, former Vice Chancellor of what was previously the Federal University of Technology in Yola. Prof, I know you wanted to start unpacking the deeper issues regarding funding of universities based on the 2 models you had earlier identified, Germany and the US. But let's pause that in the meantime. And while we are still riding on the issue of governance, I would like you to also speak to this. The issue is a persistent one. To be honest with you, I have issues in just seeking to understand some of the legal nuances, or perhaps there are instances of exceptionalism relating to all this. The governing council, because there was a great deal of agitation for this, that the governing council is now regarded as the employer of the staff in the university system, in the ecosystem, academic and non-academic. And for instance, for you to be promoted, for you to be engaged, for you to be promoted, for you to be fired, the governing council must approve. But at the same time, when a crisis erupts, such as we are having with ASU and so on and so forth, the council is bypassed. And then you go straight to the federal government. In the case of ASU, How does one understand that in the first instance? That's one. Secondly, and this is more critical to me in my opinion, considering the large ecosystem that the university represents and the role of a governing council, are we populating our governing councils with the right kind of persons, or just persons who are politically connected? And I say this, over the years, have we been doing the right things in getting the right persons to be members of governing councils of our universities? Prof.
Well, before I reply to that, I want to say my colleagues have actually pointed out important issues. There is actually a collapse of both the governing system and the funding system in Nigerian universities. Because if the funding is adequate, much of these problems we are talking about may not arise. The issue of, I think he gave out the hierarchy of, Professor Yakubu gave the hierarchy of university system, starting from the visitor down to the vice chancellor. Now, where the council is being bypassed is because of the role of the visitor. You have the visitor who actually doesn't know what's happening, but ultimately decisions are actually taken to him. Like the constitutional visitation panel, one does not feel it's necessary to really request for the president to say, okay, there's a problem here, or he suspects there's a problem here, let him constitute a visitation panel, which has become part of the issues of the agitation by the union. Now, when you look at private universities, they have board of trustees, which is on top of the governing council. So if the proprietor establishes a university, he will constitute a board of trustees, and he will hands off. And he'll be doing his businesses, anything to do with the university, it doesn't come to him at all. So why should the federal government not constitute a board of trustees? Or maybe allow the NUC to constitute a visitation panel to any university, overlook whatever is happening with the governing councils, and then whatever is happening will end up with the NUC. It does not have to bring the government, the president into the system. If you recall the last ASU strike and the previous administration, it has to come to the table of the president, Jonathan, which is very clear. So this is one of the. My colleagues also mentioned about the model we are practicing now. I don't think there's any model. That's one of the problems, because you cannot definitely tell me what is it that we're actually doing. So in order to actually allow university academic activities to thrive, what normally needs to be done is to give the universities free hand, autonomy, full autonomy, and also give freedom so that they can do whatever they like within their own context, because you have a lot of seasoned academics, administrators in the university system. Why should you go and take money and direct the university how to even spend the money or how to even pay the money? They used to get lump grant through the NUC. NUC will now sit with the universities and decide on the number of students they have, number of staff they have, research proposal they have, and allocate this money. Now, when they take this money, they now find a way of disbursing it. IPPS, UTAS will never come in. But now it has been centralized in the Ministry of Finance to the extent that even a lecturer, lecturer 1 or assistant lecturer, before his promotion is paid, it has to go through IPPS, which is actually stifling the academic activities we have said. And in most universities that we know all over the world, the universities have free hand to operate the way they actually, and that makes environment very, very conducive. So one serious recommendation one will say is grant the universities full autonomy. Let the council actually decide, as you have pointed out correctly, the employment and management of resources of the university is actually done by the council. The governing council actually appoints the vice chancellor. It doesn't have to go to the head of state. So if the head of the academic, who is the vice chancellor, is appointed by the council, why should the council not also decide on the rank and file of other staff in the university, both academic and non-academic? So I think we have to today, maybe at another time, discuss the model that we think is appropriate for this country. Because as far as I'm concerned, I don't think we have any model at the moment.
Kira, please, I'm sorry. There was an issue that Professor Mustafa raised. You recall that in the past, the appointment of a vice chancellor had to be the responsibility of the visitor,
yes,
namely the president. And he normally would get a short list of 3 names. And then there will be, of course, a great deal of lobbying and so on and so forth. And there was agitation. So the power was now ceded from or donated from the visitor to the governing council. So once you have a short list of persons who have applied, the council picks one person. There's no reference again to the visitor of the university. But there are other issues. What else can the councils do? Kira?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, it's good that this explanation is coming from a former vice chancellor, because he has been in the
I'm also a chairman of a governing council
in the seat of power
at the moment.
Yes.
Which institution is that?
Admiralty University in Ibusun.
Abuja. Okay, and the thing like you said, that there's no model as far as he's concerned. Considering what has transpired in the structural arrangement of our tertiary institutions. As a matter of fact, what the lawyers would call a lacuna or something, or if you like, a conundrum of sort, because what we're seeing is a chain of managerial personalities who perhaps could not even be able to separate powers from each other. You have a chairman governing council, you have management committee, you have the chairman of the senate, you have the vice chancellor, you have the visitor, you have the NUC. See, these things are just bodies formed within the ecosystem that Professor Chupu talked about, yet we're not getting results. That is the irony of the situation. And I want to return again to Professor Menoma. Professor Mustafa said that we don't have a model. He said we don't have a model at the moment, because what is practiced now, he could not describe in terms of aligning it to any model operational elsewhere across the globe. So what can we do now? Considering that, yes, we have all it takes to run our universities. We have the brain, we have the facilities, we have the technocrats or whatever to be able to run our universities properly. What can we do? What model can we adopt? We have series of them we have mentioned on this program from across the world. Is it possible for us to sit down as a nation to say, let's return to the drawing board as far as the education system is concerned?
Thank you very much. You see, it is not fully okay to say that we don't have a model. It is a kind of a mixed model, if you permit the coinage. That is what they call formula-based model, and there is also what they call performance-based funding model. There is also what they call negotiated funding model. So you find out that in the system we operate, there are some elements of these models found in the system. Recently, you find out that the government does budget, and a certain fraction of the budget is given to education, is given to tertiary education, to be specific. And you also find situations where certain performances of certain universities also attract some funding from the funding agencies, and also there is also the negotiated. That is what maybe the unions are doing. So you find out that there is some level of different mix of the models that exist in literature in terms of funding universities in Nigeria. But what is critical is that it is a kind of contributory models we are operating. Some come from TED fund, some come from government directly, some come from individuals and things like that. So what is basic is that we should be in a position to define the one that is going to be suitable for our environment. And the one that is suitable for our environment is the one that takes care of majority of the students. Because we have a situation where majority of our potential students are from very poor background, that they may not be able to finance their education at the tertiary level. So looking at the capacity of the parents and the environment they are coming from. So what the universities require is that the per head to train a particular student should be determined, and how to source that kind of fund should be determined, so that the university should have adequate resources to be able to manage the university so that it can be competitive. And I think that is the starting point. All these issues of the grievances of the union are around the fact that these resources are not adequate and are available to the universities, and that insisting that there must be fees is not going to solve the problem, because at the end of the day, you may have individuals in the university that are admitted but may not be able to pay the fees, so there's still going to be shortfall in terms of funding capacities of those universities.
Thank you very much, Professor Menoma. Professor Menoma, I think that one of the takeaways from your latest intervention is for us to have a scientific approach. What does it cost to train a student to graduate for a particular course? For instance, you say if it's a 4-year program, this is what it's going to cost per session, that. If it's a 5-year program, that. If it's a 6-year program, that. But after that computation is made, it doesn't appear to me to be the business of the university how the student now pays that money. It is your own finding to say for you to run a 4-year program, this is the cost. You cannot take that cost to other agencies, whether state governments who may want to issue bursaries. You may now also take it to other establishments that they want to offer scholarships and so on and so forth. And then for the other stakeholders, the community and the prospective students, to know that, look, for me to pursue this program, I would need, say, equivalent of 50,000 naira per session, or I would need 100,000 naira per session. Can I afford it? X, Y, Z. But that's the starting point for it. But I'm just wondering, because considering the role of the governing council, as we have indicated, not just appointment of vice chancellor or being the employer of the staff of the university system, but sometimes it appears that these things have just been reduced to ratification of contracts and so on and so forth. And that's why I asked the question earlier about the population of the membership of governing councils. But Professor Menoma, let's take advantage one more time of your business orientation. As I said, you are an accountant and president of ANAN. Look, can we get to a situation now where we begin to have governing councils that think outside the box, that will think of huge investment opportunities and ratify those investment opportunities for the university so as to multiply the sources of revenue that the university will get, rather than just, again, seeking to scramble around one little cake that is shrinking from the federal government?
Indeed, you see, that is the starting point. Once you have people that have commitment to the institution, you'll be in a position to actually think out of the box. But majority of the time, these are people that come as a reward of their political activities in most of the times. Assuming the university will be in a position to scout out for those that are going to actually manage the university as a governing council, such people should be in a position to actually look for endowments, look for donations, look for those that are actually going to seek for support for their individual students that may not be able to pay fees. But where you have politicians that all that matters to them is actually they see it as a reward for their patronage of their political parties. So they are not in a position actually to look for what the universities can do, what the universities can achieve, but what they can actually, the benefits they can get for themselves. So that is actually the primary problem the universities are facing. But if you have a governing council that is determined to look for endowments, that is determined to create investments, that is determined to say that these are the kind of consultancies and areas that universities can look for funds. You may find out that it will not be difficult for a university to manage its resources in such a manner that all the conditions that are required in a particular university can be achieved. But where you have a governing council that, in fact, in most instances, they don't even bother about, they are just waiting for their allowances. The papers that come to them, they hardly go through them. So you find out that we need to have maybe a change from this. It is actually a way to pay back to politicians that participate in election campaigns for certain people to be elected into governing councils.
All right. That's okay. Okay. All right. Make
the governing council is constituted of 3 different sets of actors. There's what they call the external members and the internal members. The external members are the ones that are appointed by the federal government and the pro-chancellor. The internal members come from Senate, come from congregation, come from alumni associations, and come from the community. Although the community appointment is done by government, so it is not federal government or state government, as it were, that appoints the entire members of the governing council.
Yeah, but are they active? Are they working?
It is indeed.
Can they revolutionize?
Indeed, the internal members are usually more than the external members.
Okay. Is that helpful?
Which is also not very helpful.
Exactly.
Which is also not very helpful. But again, it is the law that establishes the university that defines the composition of the governing council. We should not lose sight of that one. Mm-hmm. And that is why it goes back to the fundamentals.
Okay, please explain that.
Oh, yes. Every university has a law. For you to get a license, you must submit your law to the National Universities Commission, or that will pass it on to the National Assembly. So the law defines that is a body called council, and the composition of council is defined. So there's nothing you can do about it. You must have 4 members from Senate, who are usually professors, and it comes on the floor of Senate. There's an election, and so your peers will nominate which of the 4 that will go to council. There's a body called congregation, which is all degree holders in the university, and you elect 1 person. There's a body called convocation. You elect 1 person. The president of the alumni association is a member. So when you put all that together, you find out that the council is a healthy mix of different competencies. And I think the point that Noma is trying to make is that at times in the selection of the chairman of the governing council, a lot of political interventions also come into play at times. I'm Secretary General of the Committee of Pro-Chancellors, and I can say that the current composition of Pro-Chancellors it's extremely very strong. It's one of the strongest that we have seen in recent times. A mix of seasoned academics, seasoned technocrats, seasoned businessmen in their own right. Our chairman of council that we've not seen in a very long time. It is true, like you have said, some of them don't understand what they are supposed to bring to the university by virtue of being members of council. Yes, but by and large, I think that we have to understand that the law that establishes the universities create a composition that is very dynamic.
Fine, the law that establishes, I agreed, and what have come out so glaring now from what I've explained is the fact that the members of governing council of universities, they are well well articulated personalities that are professors and those who have done well, like you said, in the different competencies and what have you. But what we are always talking about is result.
Yes.
This is result oriented.
Yes.
Now, when we talk about university, we talk about research and development, and we have always talked about how do we have a nexus, between research results and the manufacturing sector. How do we get from the laboratory to the floor of the manufacturing sector? And overseas, like you
particularly, Kirian, how do we get? I'm sorry, gentlemen, because this is not intended to disparage the university system. From the comments that we have made and the questions we have asked, the intention is to say, look, how do we improve on what we have?
Exactly.
Reduce the intensity and frequency of crisis. More particularly, how do we get our universities to be problem solvers of our country?
Exactly. And you're going to make a comment, when we return, because when we return, we're going to focus on the issue of issue you are asking. Yes. Keep your thoughts online. We're going to.
I may forget it.
We're taking a break. Yeah. So when we come back from break, we'll be looking at what universities can do internally, to generate funds in terms of creativity, innovation, science, and technology. These are things that will
solve societal problems.
All right. So let's go on break. When we come back, the conversation continues. All right, you're welcome back, and the conversation will now continue. Professor Salihu Mustafa, shortly before we went on break, we were talking about the capacity of universities to look inwards and see how they can be creative enough to generate funds by itself. Now, for example, universities of agriculture in Nigeria, I'm not sure they have farmland. I'm not sure they are into farming for practical agriculture. I don't know. Internal roads in our universities, are they being constructed by civil engineer students or those who are maybe final year or third year, excuse me, as part of practical, right? Would you now go and hire a construction company to do roads when you have graduates of civil engineer and other professionals that work with the civil engineers? That is one. Two is if a governing council is constituted, and here we have persons who have experiences and understanding of what university education is all about, and are not making a positive impact in the development of the institution, will it be necessary to dissolve such a governing body? But generally, what I want to ask is, how can universities raise the ante in terms of building capacity and being able to generate funds internally?
I've experienced really council, and they have been very competent people, especially external members. So it is not to do with the council. If you look at the university system, everything revolves around the vice chancellor. He is the chairman of the Senate, chairman of committees, appointment and promotion committee. Almost every activity in the university takes place under the vice chancellor. So I think there's a need for us to look at the way the American system operates. The vice chancellor is called the president, and he doesn't spend more than 30% of his time in the university. He goes around looking for resources into the system. And unlike our Nigerian system, the vice chancellor actually is constrained by attending to mostly non-academic activities, instead of going out to raise revenue. So I think the way out of it, no matter how good the council is, if at the end of the day, the vice chancellor is not in a position to implement changes, it will be very difficult. So one would seriously recommend that the appointment of a vice chancellor should be advertised nationally and even internationally. If you get the best material, even if it's not a Nigerian, he should be appointed. Unlike the present system, is now being allocated to the environment or the immediate community,
to the village where the university is,
and then next to the state, and then now the regional basis. So I think one way really to enhance the status of the university by building their capacity. Much of the university don't really have the capacity of managerial capacity to really come out of the present situation that they are in, simply because they don't have very competent vice chancellors. And if you really appoint vice chancellor the way we are saying, that you advertise as is done in the United States, also in developed countries, is advertised internationally, and you appoint the best candidate, you put the criteria of actually bringing resources into the university system. And that may be a way of actually. But if you look at the funding system, it's beyond any union in this country. Because most parents and students are not willing to actually pay tuition fees. So the government must make a law, okay? And for them to make a law, once the law has been made, then you can introduce tuition into the Nigerian system. But this is beyond any union, from what I can say. Because parents, a study has been carried out recently by somebody, and he found out that over 90% of parents and lecturers and students oppose introduction of fees, even charging.
Why?
Well, because they are used to, it was abolished in 1976, and people got used to it. So now to bring it becomes like a new thing.
Why is it that we're scared of change? There has to be a change at some point in time in life, because change is the only.
Even the government itself doesn't want to change, and even the government today can introduce introduce a bill which may be passed by the assembly, nobody will complain. And then if people are not willing, then we do the German model, which I've said. The state will bear the cost, but then you have to impose a heavy tax on the people. So, as I've said, there is no model that we know that operates in this country simply because we don't know what to do. Are we actually sharing the cost, or we are actually funding the university 100%? And this is not the case at the moment.
We're actually sharing the costs. The numbers that you've talked about have been done. We know how much as at 2021, how much it costs to deliver a 4-year degree program in each of the academic disciplines. We know how much it costs. Yeah. And if you look at the fee structure of the private universities, it's closer to the reality of how much it costs to deliver a degree program in the humanities or in the social sciences. So that is that cost. And like you said, it now behoves on the promoters of the system to say, okay, this is what it costs us to train one student in engineering in a year. In 4 years, this is what it's going to cost. Where is that money going to come from? Mm-hmm. Government can now say, okay, at this rate, I can afford to provide full scholarship to 10,000 students, because from our manpower planning and data, we need 10,000 engineers between now and the next 4 years. So I can afford to pay for 10,000 engineering students. I can afford to pay for 5,000 doctors and give all that. And then you now come drill down and say, okay, for the number of students that federal government is saying, I can afford to train 20,000, 50,000, 100,000, as the case may be, write a check to the universities that are going to provide that training. And if the universities can then use that money to take care of their salaries and overheads, so be it. But if it's not enough to take care of their salaries and overheads, then they have to go and look for money or take from other students who are coming in. The students and parents are already paying a living cost. 210 days is what you need to spend in a university in 1 year when you are in school. You pay for accommodation, you feed, you transport, you buy your data, you take care of your toiletries. We've also calculated that cost based on your locality. So a student in the University of Lagos will spend 3 times what a student in Benue State University of Agriculture, Makurdi, will spend because of living conditions. So you know that from the perspective of cost sharing, both the federal government and the state government is also paying. So we have those costs. I think fundamentally it comes back to how it is aggregated and structured. And my own personal position and what a number of us have been advocating is that put all that on the table and say, federal government, this is how much I have, this is how much I can afford. Full scholarship, part scholarship, bursary, as the case may be. We did this in the past, so it's not as if it is rocket science and we are experimenting anything new. We have an education bank that has been moribund. We have civil society organizations that give scholarships. LNG, Shell, and all these people give scholarships. So we put all that one in the perspective and say, okay, what percentage of cost sharing are you able to deliver as far as this is concerned? The whole thing about tuition fees, because in other parts of the world, how much a credit unit costs is determined. How much a credit unit so you know how many courses you can take and you pay for it. But like Prof said, 1976 federal government said no tuition, and so when you talk about tuition, it becomes a mental block to the rest of this thing. And in other parts of the world, is either you go and take a loan and federal government underwrites it and says, okay, you pay back after 25 years, subject to your appointment sum of money. The unions don't like it because they argue, and quite rightly so, if you ask me, that federal government has not prioritized education. That if federal government has prioritized education, they won't be saying that they don't have money to fund education. At 5.6% of the budgetary allocation, between you and me, you know that is not adequate in a developing country, in the state of development we are now, where education should be nothing less than 20% of our budget.
Well, Professor Chopin, thank you very much. I know that, yesterday, my colleague Kieran will recall, I threw this in, and I said, ASU is not the principal focus of our conversation on that. ASU probably is suffering from ideological capture. Part of what you just said, ideological capture, the Marxist, Leninist, and socialist government must be responsible for what's on sort of for 45 years down the line. The world has changed, and our country has also changed. And if the numbers that you have said, those numbers are relevant to policy decision making. To say, yes, okay, now this is how much, this is the bar that we would allow, or this is the minimum fee that universities can charge for federal universities, for instance. This is the minimum that you can charge, or this is the upper limit that you can charge. Whatever shortfall there is, that goes in there. Plus other contributions from TED Fund, NUC, and so on and so forth. Professor Paiko is still with us via Zoom, IVP University at La Pai. Professor Paiko, again, relating to the issue of governance of our universities, the role of the governing councils. The point was made by one of our regular guests on Good Morning Nigeria, Dr. Umar Bindri. And he said, and I want to paraphrase him, he says that it should be worrisome to our universities that whenever they have their convocation ceremonies, and you look at the booklet of the convocation, sometimes very fat, you lift through it from page 1 to page last, you don't have information relating to patents registered by academics in that institution. You don't have trademarks or so on and so forth designed by them. You don't have enough information about awards received or consultancies engaged in. New things being done by our universities, which points in one direction to the poor linkage between the institutions and industry or society. What role can the governing councils play in this?
Thank you very much. Permit me to also respond to some of the issues raised by some of my colleagues. In my opinion, the way our universities are currently constituted, there is nothing wrong with the way the governing council operates. It's a committee. There is nothing wrong with the way Senate of the university operate. There is nothing wrong with the way that management, of course, operates, or for that matter, the congregation. The laws governing universities are quite very clear, except for hitches and little problems that you may see, isolated cases here and there. Everything about the operation of universities in Nigeria, in my opinion, there's nothing wrong with it, right from NUC down to the university congregation. The one single most important thing wrong with the Nigerian university system is the funding model. The funding model is so wrong that it is causing the industrial, the unions to always be very active. They feel they are not adequately remunerated. It trails down into the type of facilities we have for research, very little allocations to research. It goes down to the number of classrooms, the number of students admitted It goes down to facilities, electricity, water supply, road networks in the university. It goes to student hostels. It goes to every other thing that makes the university to actually be functional. What we should be discussing is principally about the funding model. We seem to still rely on the 1960s thinking that university education should be free. University education system everywhere around the world is not free. It has never been free, and it will not be free. Now, somebody has spoken about autonomy. If you give university autonomy and you make sure that when you are recruiting a vice chancellor, like the former vice chancellor was speaking, it is a universal thing, anybody can apply, the most competent person is taken in, and you the funding of the university is disaggregated. We have Professor Chifu there. He spoke very clearly about all the numbers you need to know about how much it takes to train an engineer, how much it takes to train a medical doctor. And you want the government to fully take charge of this funding, and you want students to pay 35,000 naira per annum to come and study natural sciences. It will not work. I keep telling people, the universities in Nigeria are probably 200 or thereabout now. If you look at them critically, from when University of Ibadan came on stream in 1947 or thereabout, to the year 2000, it's only 1/4 of it, about 50 universities or thereabout. But from the year 2000 to date, the remaining 150 universities have come on stream. We are living in a time when a faith-based university, a faith-based university has risen in this country, where we have University of Ibadan, ABU, we have a University of Lagos, and a faith-based university that has concentrated on their own funding model, becoming the best university in Nigeria in the last 2 or 3 years. What does that tell you? It tells you that the funding has to really be tackled. How do you do that? First of all, the government should remove its hands from the issue of running the university. It should focus on scholarships, bursaries, and of course grants to the university based on whatever criteria. Secondly, the federal government and state government should focus on maybe establishing an educational bank where students can go and take loans, and these loans can be repaid. We heard very clearly that Obama, the president, he couldn't pay his loans until he was even president. For you give students loans to be able to cater for the number that you are going to be able to cater for, so that there will be a shift of the funding of the universities directly from government, so that government will now decide what percentage they have to, to take care of, if it is 60, 50% or 40, and then they send it as grant, so that the university do not have to wait, and go through the bureaucracy of government. When funds are needed in the university, they don't come as at when due. The paltry amount that is allocated does not get to us. And then there is this lump sum. We want everybody every university to fit into that same single model. All federal universities will have to go to the Ministry of Education to collect their envelopes. The envelopes that sometimes do not cater for this. So we really need to think critically and go back to our founding father. We took our model from UK or from Britain, and even they have abandoned that. Today, undergraduates in Britain, it's about £10,000. £10,000. Students who cannot afford go to look for scholarships. If they don't get scholarships, they go for loans. If they do not go for loans, and then of course they probably some other community, local authorities, the state government will give them some kind of grants or some scholarships or so that the university can fix the school fees that is commensurate to what the university will require to be able to adequately pay all the staff in the university, to be adequately buy all the equipment, to adequately, everybody is running away from this fact. We don't want to tackle the fact that, they will say, you are the one that, brought about for university to charge high school fees. But no, we have to really be very realistic. The university is not a place where you manage. You don't manage graduates. you roll out high quality graduates that will be able to translate into changing your economy, and so that prosperity will come. They say every country, the quality of leadership, the quality of a country can be measured from the quality of the graduates from the higher institutions of every university. Presently, we are just rolling out exactly what we are putting in. And only 10% can be accommodated on campus, and then students are staying off campus. They pay 10,000 naira for hostel accommodation, whereas they can take 200,000 accommodation outside. Students cannot pay school fees, but they hold handfuls of 200,000, 500,000. We keep talking about, most of our people cannot fund education, but here we are in this country. When we wanted to do agri revolution, the federal government gave loans to farmers, anchor borrowers, food to sustain the economy. The farmers who grow this crop, we are giving loans.
Prof, we'd like to thank you. Really, you have made a very valid contribution this morning on this program. And in fact, all our guests did, and coming from different perspectives that have allowed us to have a better, clearer understanding of what it takes to run universities, and of course the steps that we should take as a nation to, of course, change the course of history of Nigerian universities.
By remodeling the governance structure.
Exactly, not only in the modeling the governance structure, but at least to ensure that those who find themselves in the bodies running the institutions should also know that there should be creativity in whatever they do. Otherwise, we're not going anywhere. Like you said, what we have taken from Britain, which is the model of the 60s, they have dropped already. We are still hanging on that, as if we don't believe in change, which of course is a constant phenomenon. Professor Chofi, you want to say something, just in a jiffy?
Yeah, there's a nexus between full autonomy and funding, and it is that nexus that we have not properly concretized. Proprietor, the people who run the system, and the expectation of that system, all is a supply chain that needs to be coupled together, and we haven't gotten it right.
Thank you
to do so.
That's
a matter with KIV.
Exactly, and from what we have all said, that there needs to have executive marketing. The vice chancellor should go all out, to source for funds. You don't just sit there and be managing funds that are not sufficient to run the university. So on this point, I'd like to thank Professor Salihu Mustafa, former Vice Chancellor, Modibo Adama University, Yola, and former Director of Research at the NUC. We thank you, sir, for coming this morning and sharing your thoughts and your experience with us. So Professor Yakubu Aboki Ochefu, Secretary General, Committee of Vice Chancellors of Nigerian Universities, and Secretary General of the Committee of Pro Chancellors of Nigerian Federal Universities.
Thank you.
Would like to appreciate you. Now, Mohammed Alu Paiko, Professor of Nutritional Biochemistry and Biotechnology and Deputy Vice Chancellor, Academic Ibrahim Badamosi, Babangida University, Lapai, Niger State. You reached out via Zoom. We thank you for sharing your thoughts with us this morning. We hope you're going to have a time for us to discuss the issue of biotechnology with you, in the future. Thank you once again. And via Zoom from Owerri, we also have Professor Mohammed Menoma, former Vice Chancellor, Nasarawa State University, KP. Thank you indeed.
Okay, gentlemen, that does it for us, and indeed for our viewers. We appreciate your tuning in. Join us again tomorrow for a fresh package of Good Morning Nigeria. Same time, 7 o'clock. Kingsley.
I am Kurian Umaya. You have a good day.